We're going to spend our final glorious week on Job. The book is pretty long, and so we're going to sort of skip to the end because I think we have a sense of the essence of this piece. That we have to get to the glorious conclusion, which is God's rebuttal. So the bulk of the book is Job and his friends arguing over what has happened to Job, with the friends in the beginning sort of softly pushing the idea that Job must have done something wrong, while Job sort of rebuts them. And the arguments get a little bit more voracious as the book continues, with the friends really, being aggressive in claiming that Job must have done something, or else he wouldn't have gotten all these terrible things happening to him. When Job continues to maintain his innocence and basically saying, look, enough with you guys. I want an audience with the big fella, so to speak. I want to hear with the boss. I'm hearing a lot of noise from somebody's background. I don't know whether someone else has the TV on or whatever it is, but if everyone could just mute, that'd be awesome. Thank you. So yeah, and so Job's friends again claiming that the world works. So we talk about wisdom literature, right? The world works in a certain way. That if you're good, good things happen. If you're bad, bad things happen. That's the basis of wisdom of that time. That's ancient wisdom. And Job is saying ancient wisdom isn't working right now. There's got to be a new model in place because I know that I'm innocent. I know I haven't done anything wrong. While his friends then think that's a little bit of hubris, a little bit of ego. We know that's true for Job. Like we learned in the beginning of the book, we know that Job is in fact blameless, and Job has done nothing to warrant this kind of punishment, of consequences for his life. And so Job's sitting there going, nope, I need a meeting. Enough with you guys. I got to hear from God. I have to I want an audience. I want some kind of answer from God of why this is happening, because I know it's not right. And I'm entitled, to have a conversation. I'm entitled to have some kind of understanding of why this is happening to me right now. And of course, 37 chapters later, God obliges. And so that's what we're going to look at today, is God's rebuttal, so to speak, God's words to Job. This is an interesting text. It's not an easy text, to get through, because, again, as I mentioned with Job itself, it's poetic, and there's a lot of just, interesting words and interesting word choices in the Hebrew, which leads to a lot of interesting word choices in the English. So we are going to do our best to get through. But it is a very interesting text, and we have to spend at least a few minutes on my favorite part of the book, which is, of course, the end of the book. Is very interesting and very challenging, I think. So let us get started with Job. Okay, and I made it a little bigger today. I put it in 20-point font. It's make it a little bit bigger. Okay, so with all that said, Sharon, you want to start us off today? Just got to unmute you. There we go.
Am I unmuted? I can't see myself, but I'm unmuted.
You're good to go.
Okay. Oh, now I can see myself. Okay. Book of Job, God's response. Then the Eternal replied to Job out of the tempest and said, "Who is this who darkens counsel, speaking without knowledge? Gird your loins like a man. I will ask, and you will inform me."
So right off the bat, this isn't going to be friendly. It feels like, as I read it, it's coming out of the tempest, which is always fun. A little bit of a whirlwind. Whenever God speaks, not whenever, but there are times when God speaks to individuals, and it's a little intense. There's fire, there's smoke, there's flames. Sometimes it's a dream that's pretty intense, and here, God is like, you know what? Who dares, disturb the great and powerful Oz, kind of, because it has that sort of energy to it. Who speaks without knowing anything. You better saddle up. You better get ready, because now I'm gonna talk to you, right? You want to talk to me? I want to talk to you, and I'll tell you what's going on. And go ahead, Sharon.
Okay. Where were you when I laid the earth's foundations? Speak if you have understanding. Do you know who fixed its dimensions or who measured it with a line? Onto what were its bases sunk? Who set its cornerstone when the morning stars sang together and all the divine beings shouted for joy? Who closed the sea? Hold on, okay, got it. Who closed the sea? It goes up and down and I lose my
Yep.
place. Who closed the sea behind doors when it gushed forth out of the womb? When I clothed it in clouds, swaddled it in dense clouds, when I made breakers, my limit for it, and set up its bar and doors, and said, you may come so far and no farther. Here your surging waves will stop.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to pause right there. As you can see, there's some big chunks here of text. It's really supposed to be one really, really, really long speech for the first chapter, but we did try to break it up a little bit. But you'll see some obviously similarities in the ideas. When I look at this first part, the first few lines at any rate, about fixing the dimensions, the bases, the cornerstones, etc., etc., this to me sounds like an architect, right? I mean, God is literally saying, I built this, okay, with my own godly hands, with my own godly ideas. I built this thing. I was like a carpenter, sort of measuring. I was, putting in all the pipes and the plumbing. I was, battering up the putting up the drywall. You can tell I'm really into, I don't know anything about this stuff. But yes, architecture, certainly up my alley. So he was definitely talking about, I think, just very physical labor. And speaking of labor, the water gushes forth out of the womb, right? It's like God births the world into existence. God is making this case that, Job, you want to hear from me? Where were you when I created the entire universe here? Where were you when I was there literally creating the world you live in? And now you're going to question me about how my world works. Wait a minute. Who are you to do this? I'm God, you're Job. Be quiet. I think it's basically going to be the message of the next, 40 minutes. But that's basically the idea here that we get. And it's very graphic language, a lot about nature and how the world works. We'll keep going a little further. Debbie Siegel, you want to give that a read? You got to unmute.
Okay. Have you ever commanded the day to break, assign the dawn its place, so that it seizes the corners of the earth and shakes the wicked out of it? It changes like clay under the seal, till its hues are fixed like those of a garment. Their light is withheld from the wicked, and the upraised arm is broken.
The upraised, yeah, the upraised.
Upraised.
Yeah. Interesting poetic passage here. In the beginning, we have a good sense of it, right? The idea of the day to break, dawn. So that part is pretty straightforward. It reminds us, of our liturgy of the Yotzer, of Ma'ariv Aravim, the God who causes the times and seasons to alternate, who sets, the earth on its course. So it's, again, where were you when I made day? Like I literally made day and night. Where were you when I did that? Now this next part here, so that it shakes the wicked out of it, is an interesting idea. We have a parallel in the last line of the paragraph, but the idea that that there is a way the world works, and God knows that way, and that the world changes. That it looks one way in the morning, looks one way in the evening, and the wickedness, can be taken out, sort of plucked out of the days, and that light is withheld from the wicked, and the upraised, the proud people, like their arms are broken, so to speak, that they're pushed back down. So again, God saying, I made the world, I control the world, I have it run according to how I believe it should be run. Again, we're going to get this a lot as we go through. Debbie, one more paragraph.
Have you penetrated to the sources of the sea or walked in the recesses of the deep? Have the gates of death been disclosed to you? Have you seen the gates of deep darkness? Have you surveyed the expanses of the earth? If you know of these, tell me. Which path leads to where light dwells, and where is the place of darkness that you may take it to its domain and know the way to its home? Surely you know, for you were born then, and the number of your years is many.
I gotta tell you,
Whoa,
God's a little sarcastic here.
whoa.
God's a little snarky, as we say, in this paragraph. It's a little much. I mean, God's laying it on pretty thick here. Yeah, you know what? You're so smart. You tell me. I mean, who am I? I'm just God. Job, you can tell me. I mean, come on. You've obviously done all this cool stuff. Educate me. Enlighten me. I mean, God's really putting on a show here. I feel like God's like a smarmy teenager sort of in this thing. It's a little much, as I said. But yeah, sure. No, you tell me how the world works, buddy. You want to know where light dwells and darkness? Sure, you can. Let me know. Give me a call sometime. So it's really, God's making it pretty clear. Again, God's not making a subtle point to Job, right? It's a very intentional point. Sure, surely you were born back then. Yeah, you're an old guy. You can tell me. As we know, the span, of a human being's life is nothing in the grand scheme of creation, right? Of how old the universe is. There's a fascinating midrash taking a step back, right? It's taking a step back from this text. And you've probably heard it before. But it's about Abraham and his journey to monotheism, like his journey to the belief in God. And Abraham comes from a time when there's idolatry, when there's a lot of nature worship. And he's there and he looks at the sun and he says, surely, the sun is God. And then all of a sudden a cloud covers the sun. And so, well, the sun can't be God, because God wouldn't be covered by something else. And so maybe the cloud is God. Then the wind comes and pushes the clouds away. Oh, maybe the wind is God. Onwards and onwards and onwards. Well, it gets to the point where Abraham finally says, there has to be something else, right, that is behind all of this nature, because there has to be some kind of mover, some kind of force that I can't understand that is making all of these heavenly bodies and nature run in its courses. And that's how Abraham sort of journeys to God, right? That's what the Midrash tries to say. It's another one, and I want to say it's a Rabbi Akiva story, but it might not be. But there was a story of a famous rabbi. And in the Talmud, in the rabbinic literature, there's always these imagined conversations that the rabbis have with the pagans, or even more grandiose, with Roman noblewomen, Roman matrons, or even like the Roman emperor. And they'll go into these like theological debates. And one of them challenges, this rabbi about God. And well, if your God's so great, how come I can't see him? I could see other things, but where's your God? I got my God right here as a statue. They'll lay that kind of case on the rabbis. And in this particular story, the rabbi takes the guy outside and says, "Okay, you want to see God? First, do me a favor. Stare straight up at the sun." And the guy does it. Oh, my eyes! What am I doing? And the rabbi says, "Look, how can you see God if you can't even see one of God's creations? You can't even bear to look at the sun. How can you possibly try to envision and envisage God?" And I think about those two stories when I read Job, because I think it's the same idea, is that God is sort of beyond us, right? There are things that we can understand, things we can see, things we can learn from the natural world, but there is an Ein Sof, as we say in the Kabbalah, in Jewish mysticism, right? That there is a God that is beyond us that we cannot access. There's a God that we cannot understand in the same way. Other parts of God we might be able to latch onto in a different way, but there's part of God that is unknowable. And so therefore for us to try to question the world as God established it, it's going to be beyond our comprehension, right? That we can ask, right? And we're smart enough to ask, as we say, but not smart enough to have the answer. Not capable of getting the answer in the same way. So I think that's, again, where God's coming from in this part. Any questions so far?
I just, whatever you just said just now just reminds me of people after the Holocaust asked, how could God have allowed this to happen?
Yep.
It's something that you can't understand.
And they tried. I mean, believe me, they tried. There is a tremendous amount, even written today, but especially in the 50s, 60s, 70s, basically Holocaust theology. You know, how do you make sense of a world in which the Holocaust exists? Because that is, if we think about the span of Jewish experience, right? And we think about the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem in 586 and then again in 70, and how that had to, by necessity, transform Jewish life. The Holocaust is obviously also one of those moments that had to transform Jewish life and thinking. And how do we understand God? How do we understand our world? Because it can't be the same. You know, at least that was for a lot of people, that it can't be the same. There has to be a different understanding of what it means to be Jewish post the Holocaust. And there are, I mean, too much to get into right now, but there were obviously knowing the Jewish people, there were a variety of responses and ways of answering that exact question, such that we could answer it. You know,
Well, this makes me almost think that God is human, because he's not godly, because he's so angry. He's trying to show his strength, and not godly, like we would almost believe that he could do no wrong. He's trying to prove it.
It seems a little small. Yeah. It does seem a little small. That's to be sure. But we remember that in the Bible, you know, the biblical conception of God does express, you know, very human emotions sometimes. And God does get angry, and God does feel, you know, joy, and you know, one can even sense sometimes other sort of emotions. So I'm just thinking about really anger, joy, you know, and sadness. Even one can even find in the Bible for different divine emotions, which mirrors obviously our emotions.
Mm.
You know, chicken or the egg, you know, so to speak. You know, it depends on how you want to read it. You know, do we have emotions because God has emotions, or do we have them, or is it the other way around? You know, it's one or the other. But a very interesting idea. Okay, God's gonna keep on laying it down here. Linda, you want to keep going?
Have you penetrated the faults of snow, seen the faults of hail, which I have put aside for a time of adversity, for a day of war and battle? By what path is the west wind dispersed, the east wind scattered over the earth? Who cut a channel for the torrents and a path for the thunderstorms, to rain down on uninhabited land, on the wilderness where no man is, to saturate the desolate wasteland and make the crop of grass sprout forth?
Okay, give me a second. Here we go. Does
okay. Does the rain have a father? Who begot the dewdrops? From whose belly came forth the ice? Who gave birth to the the frost of heaven? Water congeals like stone, and the surface of the deep compacts.
Very good. So again, a little more nature here. We talked about day and night. We talked about you know, other parts of nature, and now we're talking about wintertime and snow, right? It's a really good at all different elements that exist in nature. So snow and hail, wind, thunderstorms, you know, crops. You know, who's the rain's dad? Do you know who the rain's dad is? I might know who the rain's dad is. In fact, it might be me. Goodness, heavens to Betsy, it might be me. From whose belly came forth the ice? Who gave birth to the frogs? Job, let me know. Interesting, Job. You got nothing? Okay. So, and this keeps going that way, etc., etc. Thank you, Linda, for that one. Melissa and Tyler, how you guys doing? You want to unmute and read a little bit? You got a fun one here.
Ready?
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you tie the cords to Pleiades or undo the reins of Orion? Can you lead out Mazzaroth in its season, conduct the bear with her sons? Do you know the laws of heaven or impose its authority on earth? Can you spend up an order to the clouds for an abundance of water to cover you? Can you dispatch the lightning on a mission and I have it answer you? I am ready. Who put wisdom in the hidden parts? Who gave understanding to the mind? Who was wise enough to give an account of the heavens? Who can tilt the bottles of the sky, whereupon the earth melts into a mass and its clouds and its clods stick together? Can you hunt prey for the lion and satisfy the appetite of the king of beasts? They crouch in their dens, lie in ambush in their lairs. Who provides food for the raven when his young cry out to God and wander about without food?
There we go. Thank you for that, Tyler. That was a good run there. Okay, so let's start with our friends, the Pleiades. I don't think we were saying that right. Anyone know what that is? Me neither. So I just Googled it. So it's a star pattern, also known as the Seven Sisters. It's an open star cluster, northwest of the constellation Taurus.
Like the Christmas star.
It's funny because, before the class started, I was actually out with Elizabeth and the kids to try to see the, Jupiter and Saturn tonight. And it was very nice. You can sort of see it in the sky, a little bit after sundown now. It's going to be that way for the next couple of days. Then it happens again in 2080, and then not again for 800 years after that. And so just one of those cool astrological things. So anyway, so that's the Pleiades, the Seven Sisters. Orion we've heard of. I have no idea what Mazzaroth is. I got to tell you. So let's see if Google can let us know what this might be. Mazzaroth. Again, another astronomical constellation. So stars. The stars are cool. And so on this, we get here the laws of heaven or its authority on the earth. Can you talk to the clouds? Can the clouds respond to you? What about the lightning? What about the thunder? I think that's not up to you, Job. And then after he goes on his heavenly conversation here, he talks about on earth. What about lions and tigers and bears? Oh my, what do you know about them? Guessing nothing, even the raven, nothing. So again, natural world, the universe, how it works, God's domain, not Job's to understand. So again, who is Job to question? Who is Job to give God grief about what's going on? Sandy, you want to pick up here? Oh, sorry, Melissa, you didn't get a chance to read. And then I'll get you next time, Sandy. Next one, Sandy.
Did it mute?
Yep, you got it. You got it now.
Am I okay? Do you know the season when the mountain goats give birth? Can you mark the time when the hinds calf? Can you count the months they must complete? Do you know the season they give birth when they couch to bring forth their offspring to deliver their young? Their young are healthy. They grow up in the open. They leave and return no more. Who sets the wild ass free? Who loosens the bonds of the onager, whose home I have made the wilderness? The salt land is his dwelling place. He scoffs at the tumult of the city, does not hear the shouts of the driver. He roams the hills for his pasture. He searches for any green thing.
Okay.
Right?
There we go. So now we're talking about even more the natural world, about life cycle, right? Job, what do you know about the mountain goat's life cycle? What do you know about the calves and all about those other stuff? Do you know about their reproductive cycle? No, really? What about the wild ass? The onager is another kind of wild ass. What about all this other stuff you don't know about? Job, maybe you shouldn't be so mouthy with God if you know all this stuff. You gotta learn to walk where you can run, Job. Get back to me when you complete these courses I set out for you. Okay, Sandy, keep going.
Would the wild ox agree to serve you? Would he spend the night at your crib? Can you hold the wild ox by ropes to the furrow? Would he plow up the valleys behind you? Would you rely on his great strength and leave your toil to him? Would you trust him to bring in the seed and gather it in from your threshing floor?
It feels like a lot to ask from the ox. I feel like some of that might work, but I think God's trying to say, hey, if I wanted to, I can make the ox do all of this stuff. But you can't, Job. You can't have the ox do any of this really for you. You don't know how to do it. Only God knows how to have this thing happen in the exact way it's being described. Because sure, maybe he can have the ox plow a little bit, but it's also, I think the key is a wild ox. It might be a little bit beyond Job. A domesticated animal is one thing, but something that's wild, it's not going to work so well. And same thing with bringing in the seed and everything else. Like, you're not going to have a wild animal do that, nor a domesticated one for that matter. Interesting. Okay. And this is a fun paragraph coming up. Sandy, let's learn about the ostrich together.
The wing of the ostrich beats joyously. Are her pinions and plumage like the stork's? She leaves her eggs on the ground, letting them warm in the dirt, forgetting they may be crushed underfoot or trampled by a wild beast. Her young are cruelly abandoned as if they were not hers. Her labor is in vain for lack of concern. For God deprived her of wisdom, gave her no share of understanding. Else she would soar on high, scoffing at the horse and its rider.
Okay, what does this mean here about what's the point of this paragraph? Because the ostrich is taking a shot here, it sounds like to me. Poor ostrich. So here's my question, I guess. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
God is saying that he deprived her of wisdom, gave her no understanding. So is he saying to Job, but you do have that? So why are you questioning?
I wonder. Yeah, I think that's a good interpretation. I wonder if that's there. I feel like there's that joke, right? That God, creates everything, to perfection. But then what about the platypus? It's like the platypus is a weird animal, and that's sort of the joke on the platypus. That it's like it's just this weird creature that's neither here nor there. And the other one about God hides all of the mistakes underneath the ocean. Like, if you sort of like look at ocean life, it's pretty weird and wild down there. Indeed. One wonders, is God here admitting an imperfection in a way? That God created the ostrich, which is imperfect, right? The ostrich just doesn't know what they're doing. The ostrich here leaves the eggs, which could get trampled. It doesn't treat the young well. There's also something, it's not here per se, but it is, I guess that's not true. It is towards the end of this paragraph, that flightless birds are interesting in terms of just creation, right? Flightless birds, because Judaism likes the idea of perfect locomotion when it comes to its animals. There's an issue with animals that have wings and don't fly, that have the ability for primates, to that they walk on all fours even though they don't have hoofs, sort of like a monkey kind of thing. So there's something about like how animals are built and how they're structured that is interesting to the Israelites. And so, is the ostrich an imperfect animal? Is it an imperfect beast? And is that why God is pointing out, saying, hey, sometimes things are imperfect, like the ostrich? That might be one, idea here. The other is, the ostrich is exactly as I designed it. You know, it might look stupid or weird, and it might act in a ways that don't make sense to us. If you can understand the ostrich, why are you coming to bother me? Okay, the ostrich is a bird. You know, it's there, right? It makes a tasty hamburger. I've been told it's not kosher, but I'm told you can have an ostrich, pretty lean, I guess. But it's there, right, to be understood. But if you can understand the ostrich, why are you gonna come bother me? The other point I see in this is that if God depriving her of wisdom, going to that idea, is that maybe God gave the ostrich just the right amount of wisdom for an ostrich. And Job has just the amount of wisdom for Job, right? And you think about Adam and Eve, right? You think about that very first story in the Bible that we get after creation is God not wanting Adam and Eve to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, right? Because then they would be almost divine. They would have a greater sense of things. They have different knowledge that they weren't meant to have, right? And so God didn't want them to have it, put that away. But then, of course, they got it anyway, right? And so maybe there are limits to our perceptions. There are things that God, again, gives us the ability to know, but maybe not so much everything. You know, some things we get to know, not everything. And if we did know everything, what would we look like then? What would happen? Maybe it's for our own benefit that we don't have this kind of knowledge. One can think about Icarus in that story, you know, where Icarus winds up building wings for himself and then flying too close to the sun. And then it melts and he plummets, you know, and that's it. Maybe, you know, God says, you know what? This amount of knowledge is good for you. Too much, it's not going to end well. Not going to end well for you at all. Okay. Let's see, a little more animal fun. A little more animal fun. Renee, you want to read a little bit?
Sure. Do you give the horse his strength? Do you clothe his neck with a mane? Do you make him quiver like locusts? His majestic snorting, spreading terror. He paws with force. He runs with vigor, charging into battle. He scoffs at fear. He cannot be frightened. He does not recoil from the sword. A quiverful full of arrows whizzes by him, and the flashing spear and the javelin. Trembling with excitement, he swallows the land. He does not turn aside at the blast of the trumpet. As the trumpet sounds, he says, "Aha!" From afar, he smells the battle, the roaring and shouting of the officers.
The ostrich has to feel pretty bad after this. The horse gets a really nice little thing here.
Right.
You know, horses are awesome. The horse has strength, right, and courageousness. I'm not sure I've ever heard a horse that snorted majestically, but sure, why not? I'm not really a horse person, but fine. You know, they can majestically snort all they want, I guess. But he's, you know, they're vigorous and strong. They're charging into the battle. They're going into the fray. He scoffs at fear, just like me. Scoffs at fear. He cannot be frightened. He does not recoil from the sword. Fantastic, right? Really just tough stuff. You know, the arrows and javelins fly by him, and he's just charging in because he's strong and he's brave. Who made the horse that way? Was that you, Job? You know, no, not Job, right? Very good. It was God, God who did it, right? God made the horse like that, not like Job. Again, it feels like God wants Job to take a zoology class at the minimum. You know, certainly when you look at all these animals and these descriptions, one does call to mind the work of Maimonides, amongst others. Maimonides is the most prolific, that really did say that if you want to understand God, the first thing you have to do is work to understand the natural world. And you have to sort of understand how the world works, why it works. You learn your science, learn your physics, learn your metaphysics. You know, learn these things, and then study theology afterwards. You know, sort of learn just how existence is supposed to work. Okay.
So yeah, maybe he's saying he could create something as wonderful as the horse and something as silly as the ostrich. Mm-hmm. that he can do so much in between. He can do anything.
That's a really good point. Thank you for that. I think it's a great parallel, right? That
Yeah.
the ostrich is a ridiculous creature, comparatively, and the horse is majestic, even in snorting. It's a majestic and strong animal. Very nice. Very nice. And a little more animal fun here, Renee. Take the last one, Renee.
Okay.
Good.
It is by your wisdom that the hawk grows pinions, spreads his wings to the south. Does the eagle soar at your command, building his nest high, dwelling in the rock, lodging upon the fastness of a jutting rock? From there he spies out his food, from afar his eyes see it. His young gulp blood. Where the slain are, there is he.
Yeah, a little gross, by the end of this.
Very gross.
A little gross. But the idea is we have the hawk, we have the eagle, these sort of bigger birds that are also birds of prey, also trafe. But the idea is that the eagles, they can build their nest on high. Eagles are, again, very majestic, creatures. And then, he gets a little carnivorous from there. He's got the ability to spy his food, to see it from a long way out, and then bring it back to the nest, who finish the rest of it off. And then where are their bodies, there are vultures, so to speak. So follow the buzzards. Okay. Almost there, folks, almost there. Chapter 40. Job's gonna get a little bit of a word in edgewise here. Bob, how you doing? Bob, are you able to unmute? I'm not sure you can unmute. Bob, you have to unmute the thing so we can hear. There we go.
Let me reply to Job.
There you are.
Don't be disciplined. Complain against Shaddai. He who arraigns God must respond. Job said in reply to the eternal, see, I'm of small worth. What can I answer you? I clap my hand to my mouth, and I've spoken once, I will not reply. Twice I will do so no more.
Okay, yes. Thank you, Bob. Good to see you. And so Job here says, yeah, maybe I'm going to zip the lip a little bit. I'm going to keep it a little quiet. Now that I actually have my audience with God, maybe I'm going to rethink some of my braggadocio, or at least my brazenness in demanding this audience with God. Bob, you want to do one more paragraph here?
Then the Eternal replied to Job out of the tempest and said, gird your loin like a man. I will ask, and you will inform me. Would you impugn my justice? Would you condemn me that you may be right? Have you an arm like God's? Can you thunder with the voice like God's?
Oh, thank you, Bob. That's very good. So, yeah, we saw this language earlier on. Gird your loins like a man. I will ask and you will inform me. So again, buckle up, buddy. It's time. It's going to be a long ride for you, Job. And who are you to impugn my justice? Who are you to tell me that I'm wrong, in what I'm doing? Throughout this entire thing, it should be noted as we get closer to the end here, that it does seem like Job's getting a little bit of a verbal beating in this. And so keep that in mind as we get closer to the end of our program here, about how this sounds and then how the book ends, because it does, I think, have a little bit of daylight between those two things. A little bit of I think, to me at least, it's a little bit of confusing, putting those together. Okay, Sharon, you want to pick up here? Yeah.
Deck yourself now with grandeur and eminence. Clothe yourself in glory and majesty. Scatter wide your raging anger. See every proud man and bring him low. See every proud man and humble him, and bring them down where you stand. Bury them in the earth, hide their faces in obscurity. Then even I would praise you for the triumph your right hand won you.
Yeah, so here you see God saying, hey, Job, you think you're so great and the world's so easy? Okay, fine. You go out there and do this. You fix the world, right? You go and you administer justice and right to the world, right? You take care of all this if it's so easy to do. Thank you for that, Bob. I appreciate that. We're going to move on. Okay. Sharon, go ahead with the behemoth.
Take now Behemoth, whom I made as I did you. He eats grass like the cattle. His strength is in his loins, his might in the muscles of his belly. He makes his tail stand up like a cedar. The sinews of his thighs are knit together. His bones are like tubes of bronze, his limbs like iron rods. He is the first of God's works. Only his maker can draw the sword against him. The mountains yield him produce, where all the beasts of the field play.
We're going to be on a long run right now about two ancient creatures, the behemoth, and then we're going to get to Leviathan in a second. These are two mystical creatures. It is completely unclear what they're supposed to be because they're not really referred to in other texts, that, I mean, at least in biblical texts, or at least not described. But there's a understanding, there's a midrash, rabbinic interpretation, that as the world was being created, God also created these giant mythological beasts. And it turns out they didn't play well with others. And it was a little bit too much to have them, sort of like a unicorn on steroids. You know, if you can think about a unicorn being fun, yeah, cute, horsey with a little horn on it. You know, these are gigantic, scary, angry creatures that are basically works of destruction. And so God's telling Job, hey, you know what? I made you. I also made the behemoth. You know, this huge, scary beast that is terrifying to behold and is not here anymore, or at least on Earth. And that if one was going to try to slay him, it's impossible. Only I can end him. Only I can draw the sword against him. Keep going, Sharon.
He lies down beneath the lotuses, in the cover of the swamp reeds. The lotuses embower him with shade. The willows of the brook surround him. He can restrain the river from its rushing. He is confident the stream will gush at his command. Can he be taken by his eyes? Can his nose be pierced by hooks?
Excellent. Yeah, embower is definitely the word. I Googled it too. Embower, it means a shelter, you know, to cover in a way. Could have just said cover, it would have been easier. But no, the word was embower. So sure. But again, this very mystical idea of this huge, gigantic, scary animal that can't be tamed. You know, that you can't have a thing like a piercing right in the nose that you can draw him along with. That's not going to happen with Behemoth. By the way, should we all merit it in the next world, in Olam Haba, when the time comes for the day of judgment and all that's said and done, we'll all sit together at the banquet table of the heavens, and the first course is going to be Behemoth. The best steak around, I guess. I don't know. But that
I Googled it. Look at what it's.
What you got there?
Do you all see it?
Yeah.
I don't know where they got that. Is that funny?
I have no idea either. That looks like again, that ox on steroids. It looks really
I don't think I want that for our dinner.
Hey, you know, it might taste good. You know, you put a little, you know, little salt, little pepper.
Okay, if you say so. If you say so, Rabbi.
I don't know. I like my red meat, as we know, but that might be a little much even for me. But that's okay, by the way. If you don't want the steak, you can order the fish, and that's next. Because that's next here, Leviathan. So the fish comes next. Debbie, you want to pick up here with the fish? You got on mute? Look, there you go.
Can you draw out Leviathan by a fish hook? Can you press down his tongue by a rope? Can you put a ring through his nose or pierce his jaw with a barb? Will he plead with you at length? Will he speak soft words to you? Will he make an agreement with you to be taken as your lifelong slave? Will you play with him like a bird and tie him down for your girls? Where are we?
Sorry. Here we go.
Shall traders traffic in him? Will he be divided up among merchants? Can you fill his skin with darts or his head with fish spears? Lay a hand on him and you will never think of battle again.
Okay, so again, Leviathan similar. Okay, so again, if you don't like the steak, you get the fish. Leviathan here, huge. Can you put a ring through his nose? Pierce his jaw with a barb? You're gonna catch him like you would your average grouper? That's not gonna happen here. You're not gonna be friends with him. You're not gonna be holding hands in the candlelight, speaking soft words to each other. That's not gonna be a thing either. He's not gonna say, "Hey, buddy, I'll be your slave. It's okay. Put me in the aquarium next to, in the Clearwater Aquarium, next to the Hope and next to the other ones that are the Winter, next to them. No, I'm not going to do tricks for you. You can't play with him." That's it. He's just this huge, scary thing that would eat you as soon as he look at you. And this is also now, as I mentioned, and it is true, the second course in heaven is Leviathan. So you can get Behemoth, the meat, or you can have Leviathan, you can have fish, which, by the way, leads to the question, which is,
What's the question?
if you have meat and you have fish, what's missing?
Vegetables.
One would think that's a good answer too. Poultry, you have to have fowl. I mean, you got fish, you got steak, and so supposedly, has anyone ever read the Rosh Hashanah story, Yom Kippur story about the ziz? Yeah, I got some head nod from some people on this. It's the hardest word. The ziz doesn't fly around with God to find the hardest word. And of course, spoiler alert, the hardest word is "I'm sorry." That's what the Yom Kippur story. Ziz is a fantastic mythical bird-like creature, and he's supposed to be the fowl during this meal, which sort of puts a dampening on the story, in my opinion. But nonetheless, okay. That was a little extra for you. A little extra Jeopardy knowledge for you. Okay, we're going to skip ahead a little bit because I see we only have a few minutes left, and I want to get to the end here because all this is about the Leviathan still. This is a long run on Leviathan. And we understand what Leviathan is by now. So now we're going to get to the end here. Okay, so now chapter 42, God said what God has said, and now Job has to talk a little bit himself. Job said in reply to the Eternal, "I know that you can do everything, that nothing you propose is impossible for you. Who is this who obscures counsel without knowledge? Indeed, I spoke without understanding of things beyond me, which I did not know." Judaism doesn't like that. This is also rephrased here as well, right? They don't like us speaking Mishigas. If we know, we can speak, but if we don't speak, zip the lip. And that's what we're getting here from Job. "Hear now, and I will speak, and I will ask, and you will inform me," playing back what God had told him, right? And so Job is saying, listen, I'm done talking, I'll speak a little bit, but you're going to tell me. "Had I heard you with my ears, but I now see you with my eyes. Therefore, I recant, I relent. I give up, God. You win, I lose. I'm dust and ashes. Shouldn't have said anything. Shouldn't have made a whole big Megillah about this. That's fine. I'm done." Okay, so Job apologizes. Job recants. So God then, after all this, after it feels to me at any rate, that God has spent the last 3-4 chapters just slapping Job around a little bit, God's going to speak some more words to Job. So after God speaks to these words to Job already, the Eternal says to who? Eliphaz, one of his doofus friends from the earlier chapters, who's been sitting there on his duff, I guess, while this whole thing's been happening. But Eliphaz then gets a little bit of attention. And God's going to talk to Eliphaz. And what's he going to say to Eliphaz? "I am incensed at you and your two friends, for you have not spoken the truth about me, as did my servant Job." Wait a minute. Didn't Job just get slapped around for 3 chapters? And now all of a sudden Job is in the right?
Yeah. What's going on?
Oy, oy, oy. "Now take 7 bulls and 7 rams and go to my servant Job and sacrifice a burnt offering for yourselves. And let Job, my servant, pray for you, for to him I will show favor and not treat vilely, since you have not spoken the truth about me, as did my servant Job. Eliphaz the Temanite and Bildad the Shuhite and Zophar the Namathite went and did as the Eternal had told him, and the Eternal showed favor to Job. So after all of that,
And
the three friends are the ones that get chastised and scolded and told they have to go repent for what they did wrong. And Job is in the clear. So God's problem seems to be not what Job said about God, but more that he wanted the audience with God, that he wanted to have that dispute conversation and answers. Remember, the very beginning of the story, right, there was that dilemma about how does God work in the world? And so what God is saying to Job is, hey, Job, maybe you're right. Maybe be less of a jerk about it, and maybe a little bit less upfront, with me and wanting to demand answers. You're right, Job. Maybe the world sometimes does stink, and there's no answer for it. As opposed to your doofus friends who think there's going to be an answer for everything. Ha ha ha. It's not true. So God rejects here the arguments of the friends and makes them go back and repent, while Job is in the clear. Okay, interesting, weird, but wait, there's more. One more paragraph to go. I think it's one more paragraph. Two more paragraphs to go. Basically the same thing. The Eternal, after all of this, the Eternal restores Job's fortunes when he prayed on behalf of his friends, and the Eternal gave Job twice of what he had before. All of Job's brothers and sisters and all of his former friends came to him, and they had a meal with him in his house. They consoled and comforted him for all of the misfortune that the Eternal had brought upon him. Each of them gave him one kesita, a little bit of cash, all right, a little kesef, a little kesita, and each one gold ring. And the Eternal blessed the latter years of Job's life more than the former. He had 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels, 1,000 yoke of oxen, and 1,000 she-asses. He also, in his old age, I might add, had 7 sons and 3 daughters with his wife, who somehow survived this whole thing. But 7 sons and 3 daughters. The first he named Jemima, the second Kitsia, and the third Karen Hapuch. Nowhere in the land were women more beautiful than as beautiful as Job's daughters to be found. Their father gave them estates together with their brothers. Job lived 140 years, longer, I think, to see 4 generations of sons and grandsons. So Job died old and contented. To that I say, what a crock. I do not find this for a second. That this was the actual ending of this story. This is, to me, completely undermines the entire book of Job, these last 2 paragraphs. In my humble opinion, I could certainly be wrong, but in my humble opinion, yikes. Okay, because the entire point of the story, right, is that sometimes the righteous person suffers, right? Sometimes the righteous person, it doesn't go well. Sometimes the old wisdom doesn't work. Because when the good don't always get rewarded and the bad don't always get punished. That was the entire 41 and a half chapters of this book, was giving us that message. But the last 2 paragraphs, whoops, we were wrong. Job gets all his stuff back. He gets more
happy ending.
He gets more sheep and more camels. And not only did he have children, he had beautiful children who could rival their beauty. And they got estates, and everyone was really happy, happily ever after. Huzzah, huzzah, hooray, hooray. I would call this, in my opinion, and I think you've heard me say this before, my faithful ones who are here with me every week, this is the Disney version of the Job story. That somebody read this story and got to the end where I think it's supposed to end, probably right about here. I recant and relent being but dust and ashes. I think that's the end of the story. And the end, book closes. And I think someone read this and went, oh, we can't sell this. This is terrible. I mean, my God. This poor guy Job got his butt kicked for 40 chapters of this book, and he got decimated. His children were killed, everything was burned and destroyed, and he's there with boils in the middle of the desert. And then God smacks him around even further, gives him a tongue lashing afterwards. And I think, and that's how I think it's supposed to end. Job understands. He's sorry. Sorry, God. I don't know how the world works. I accept my fate with a little more grace than I've accepted the past, 35 chapters. Whether he should have or not is a whole other story. But I think that's the idea, to accept his suffering with some dignity and some aplomb, sort of with it. But then someone read this one, nope, we're not going to sell this. This is a terrible ending. We have to Disneyfy this. We have to have a happy ending. So it's Job's friends. They're the ones who are terrible. And Job is wonderful, and he's going to get prizes for completing this most horrible game show that we have. You Bet Your Life, starring Job. He's on the world's worst game show, and now he has at least survived to the end of it and wins the grand prize. I don't know. It's nice, it's a nice thought. I'm not sure whether it does not undercut the entire book. And that's my argument, that it does. Maybe other people see it differently, but that's what I'd put out to you, is that they need to somehow make this feel better for Job. Who doesn't love a happy ending, right? But again, the whole point is, I think, of the book is sometimes there is no happy ending. Sometimes we might want there to be, sometimes there isn't. And that stinks. We don't like it, but sometimes it's just how the world works. That's a lousy.
Rabbi?
Yeah, go ahead.
It's funny. The first thing I thought of, I know this is not the right interpretation, but that God rewards Job because he questioned God. That you can question God and God will not be mad at you.
Yeah, I think there is something to that, actually, because I think that's part of what Job is trying to say, is that we don't have to accept things as they are, right? Job is revolutionary. The argument becomes almost separated in a way where Job is correct, I think, and which is what we're trying to get to towards the end, is that Job is correct that sometimes the world stinks, but it's a presumption that he should be given the answer. I think that's where the divide is, in a way, from God and Job, is that Job passes sort of the first test in a way. He's righteous and he suffers, and he understands that, look, maybe this is a different paradigm, but he still wants an explanation. He wants an accounting. He wants somebody to tell him, hey, Job, sorry, this is why your life stinks right now. But he's not privy to that. He doesn't get that knowledge, right? Yeah.
Was this, I'm thinking along these lines, was this God's way of showing Job from the very beginning that maybe it's good to be humble?
Well, I think Job's humility it deteriorates throughout the book. I mean, I think that the Job that we're seeing now is pretty insistent, frankly, on being a good guy. He's pretty insistent on being righteous and innocent, and he can't possibly have screwed up. Which is, again, we know from the story, he's actually correct, right? That's the whole point of the first 3 chapters, right? The introduction is that it sets us up for this confrontation because we know Job is right. We know Job is blameless. We know Job isn't, a serial killer in his spare time. Like, Job is a good person, but he suffers, right? And he wants to know why that's true. How can he be a good person and still be suffering? And his argument is because God doesn't operate the way we want God to sometimes. But if God doesn't operate the way that we want God to, then again, Job says, I want to know. Somebody let me speak to the manager, and I think it's that moment where it begins to go askew for Job. But by the end of it, again, he wins, so to speak. All of his dead kids and everything else in the first 3 chapters, we'll forget about them for a minute. But in the end, he wins. He gets all this stuff back and more. And so again, which is, by the way, another reason why I think that that's a little bit off, is that I feel like, he still he has all these loved ones and everything else that they all died at the whim of a divine experiment, right? And so you can't make that better by just, you know, more kids and more whatever it is. That's a little too transactional, I think, and a little bit too, it's not relational in any real way. But that's maybe a separate point. So yeah, but it's definitely, it's a challenging book, and I wonder if it had ended with dust and ashes, whether it would have made it into the book, into the Bible. Like if it ended with dust and ashes, could it have still sold, so to speak, as a story? Would it be as palatable, or would it be knowing that it was still going to be challenging, right? Would we be okay with that? It's okay to be challenged. You need to challenge your audience, right? I mean, I wonder.
Everybody likes a happy ending.
Bingo. I think that's the flip of it. Exactly right. Is everyone likes a happy ending. You know, the hero has to ride off into the sunset, you know, with the romantic lead, right? You know, we need to have that moment at the end. We can all go, ah, and we paid our $10 or whatever to see a movie nowadays. And we had a feel-good moment at the end. No one wants to see the bad guy win. Even if the bad guy in this case is God, you know, wrecking Job's life up. But no one wants to see the bad guy win. No one wants to hear the message that life is random and that you can live a good life and you know what, you get beat up anyway. That's not a bestseller. You need to believe, we all need to believe, I think, that if we do the right things, good things are going to happen. But we also know that that's not always factual. You know, that's not always the way the world works. And so would it be better to challenge one's audience to think deeper on it, or would it be better to give everyone a Hershey's kiss and say, hey, you know, it's okay, it'll be all right? I wonder. That's going to conclude our time together with Job. Next week, not next week, we're going to take next week off as a little bit of vacation. We'll come back in January on it with a new book. What do we got next? I don't even remember. Oh, well, this is interesting. Okay, I got a couple things to do. We'll see. Okay, Song of Songs is actually next canonically. So we have Song of Songs next. I usually save that for Passover, but Song of Songs, yeah, it is next. So we shall delve into the Megillot, it looks like. So that'll be fun. Bye, y'all. Have a great night.
Thank you very much.
Happy New Year,
Thank you,
everybody.
Rabbi.
Yes, happy New
Yes,
Year.
Happy New Year.
Year, everyone.
Thank
Yeah.
you.